Atlingal chish, Stikat Johan. Huchiayi, ya yi khashatu, yank, wasa achtu klakayi kach, Aadé ayayeji neye, kach konach yek Qatlani hinde aya, yanay at, achtu yek Kektehin aya, Gosh, Jin kat kadech Tááx'aa hichen, Gosh jin kat katlaig. Shukwaya yag uask, Qaneqai khashatu. Gosh kejin gao achjit eudatan, Shkate, Shukan Sha aweho. Yewachan kawanik, Go ayach one. Tu oya se atihin de kakigut. Aadé kai kakishatuya. Go ayach one in khatsati. Asach tu wuke, ach eat with the she. Yewa wushtet zachan, Aadé wushtet zachan ya, Klatzin tin. Tlakawe to wasagu, ya is zachani ya, has to eat the she. Achaweach tu yakayagi, yank hayati. Ya dech yagig, ach tu wasagu, dasa kaishahit, we take a kukach, kinachi tu, ach tu wasagu choachi. Kelkak kwashahit choa. Dasa we wutua ach, wega. Ach tu wasagu, hatuye ti, aka away. Wushdaq to art. Kijk dis ganach. Tachonach to was a ǩusteeyí de arti ǩuste. Ja. Awak disi. Qone aya. Zulengetstukach tul tu. Wuch in aya qonach yake. Bilchish Johan. Qonach wuke. Recap. What was I saying? I never do this with advance. I just talk and then we just move on. So, but for you guys, I expect a recap. What was I talking about?
Just something. Be strong. Going towards the water.
Yeah.
Something about paddling together or being in a canoe together or doing something together.
Ach tu ḳusteeyí kach. Aadé neye. Well, maybe I'll write it down too. We'll do that.
Oh, and loving each other.
Yeah. Yeah, well. Can't forget that part. Okay, so I did say, let me get rid of this stuff. What's that? Ach tu ḳusteeyí kach. Aadé neye.
This, I'm proud of you all for your work.
Yes, for the way you all have worked. Then I think I said, question kat take talk shuwahichen. Jaconeya yakai khosatu yag uask. Jin kat take talk shuwahichen. Jaconeka khosatu yag uas.
Been a teacher at UAS for 11 years.
Wegao. Gwellcejin gaw kaya achjit eudatan shkate chukin sha aweho. we gao, gwell Cajun gao, awa, ach cheat out the ton, shkate, chukin sha away ho.
Kate called you at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, wa.
Oh, she's chukin shop.
Yeah, wa. Khana kawanik yigo ayachwan, or ego ayachwan, ego ayachwan, ego ayachwan. Chuoya sa ati hindi kakikigud. Adekha I kakishatuya. Khana kawanik. Oh, I'm not writing all of these down. This is good. This is big stuff that you guys are doing. Canoeing. Anybody know that one? Canoeing. There's another way you could say that.
She said it to you or she told it to you? Or
Yes.
to me?
To me. She said to me, right? You could also say ach'in. Ach'in and chan are interchangeable. Igu ayachwan.
Have strength.
Have- Be of brave heart, have strength and courage. Chuoya sa ati hindi kakikigud.
About going into cold water.
Yes. Anybody know this one? Chuoya.
It's like,
It's as if
Yes, it's as if. So that will always launch things into metaphor. Once you say that, now you're moving right into some sort of metaphor. It's as if you are going to walk into the cold water. This is how you talk about like bathing for strength, right? Deshuch. Adekha ikakishatuya. There's a couple of these with this Aadé, yeah. A really great little construction to learn how to use.
Is it like going to go there?
Well, like, so let's say we have a verb, like, let's say some really important person came through Juno, like, I don't know, Lady Gaga, right? And it was a big deal. And then if we wanted to talk about the place where Lady Gaga walked across the street, right? So we could say a kanach, that's a cross, wugu di yeah. So what this yeah does is it says the place where that thing happened. If you look in the place name book, you'll find a whole bunch of things that have yeah on it, right? So you could say Tááx'aa, the place where they drug it to shore or something like that, like Raven in the Salmon House. So here's a kanach. So we've renamed Shattuck Drive because he was a racist. And now we're going to call it a kanach Lady Gaga, the place where Lady Gaga crossed the street, right? So that's what the yeah does. Sometimes there's a little suffix on the verb, right? Because if you had the verb itself, you'd have a kanach wugud. Lady Gaga across the street, right? That's what you're saying, a kanach wugud, went across the street. So there's a little bit of a rule here when you throw yeah on the end of something. Here's the rule. If there's a vowel in the classifier, you'll put this little suffix on there. And there is a vowel in this classifier because this classifier is, there's the perfective marker, there's the classifier, there's the root. You, ya, good gets you woo good. There's actually another thing right here, which is the subject. That's the third person subject, always and forever unmarked. I did it, you did it. That's that third person, did it. There's never a pronoun there. Never, ever, ever. Okay. So because there's this is the classifier, that is a vowel. So then you throw this thing on there. This suffix follows all the same rules of that one, the relational suffix that we learned, except it's always low. Okay? So, but if we said, you know, Lady Gaga was really walking in this regal fashion. She walked like an anyadi or something, right? So if we took this same thing, akanach ugudiya, and we put Aadé in front of it, Aadé and yeah are like bookmarks. They're sort of linked to each other. So this would be the place they crossed. Now this would be the way they crossed. It is a neat thing to learn how to do. Basically you say Aadé verbi yeah. Now you have the way that they did that verb. And it could be all kinds of things. You could say kasiye Aadé akanach ugudiye. It was strange the way they crossed the road. Maybe they were walking funny. Yasatk Aadé akanach ugudiye. It was fast the way they crossed the road. Shikudzi Aadé akanach ugudiye. It was amazing the way Lady Gaga crossed the road. So I'm using this Aadé verbi ye a lot. See, Aadé, so this on its own, ye ji ne, you all worked on. There's applause for Lady Gaga across the road. I'm assuming that's what it's for. And then Aadé ka'i kakishatu ye. And you have to remember, she was probably in her late 80s, a high fluency elder who would call me before classes and just get me fired up, because when I was first starting this job. And you go back 11 years when I was first starting this job, I was like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to teach people Shinggit. I mean, I had an idea of what I was going to do, especially like intermediate, advanced stuff. It's like, I don't know, let's go figure it out. Now I know a little bit. So what is this? Aadé ka'i kakishatu. And here's a hint. That is you are going to. We're going to look at these futures. We haven't really looked at this stuff yet, perfectives, futures. We're going to get there. So that once you see some of these things, you're like, okay, that's got to be a future. And that's got to be second person. Here's what it would look like in a perfective. Oops. Ka'i yishatu. Do we know what that one is? Oh, someone's coming here with a box. Shetashiku kayatachiu.
I don't know if anyone else got caught behind the accident.
There was another one?
So I went around the back loop to get here. So there's a long line of vehicles just on the other side of, on the other side of the lake, I guess. Just
Is that a boat? A boat went off the road or something?
something long.
I saw
Yeah.
the boat earlier.
It was off the road, but the road was still open when I came through.
Okay.
And then yesterday was. It's just a bad time to drive in this town. Everybody be careful. But everybody in the room can get a book. Kukage to a tea. Okay. Sheesh train. Okay, so we're still on Ha'i Yishatu. So here, these, what about this? Okay, shtu, Those are two different things, right? Shuwatáni, ḵusteeyí. Yes. What is this? Ḳusteeyí.
Teacher.
Teacher, right? So this ḳatu is the teaching verb, right? So in this case, if I said ḳusteeyí, you taught it to people. You taught it to people. So then if we move it to the future, so the future form would be ḳusteeyí. Some of you in this class are going to become teachers if you're not already. That's just what's going to happen. Can't learn Lingi and not teach people. Well, I mean, I guess you can, but geez. What about shuwatáni?
It must be I'm teaching myself.
That is, you taught yourself, and so this is you. Oops. You taught yourself, or you studied. So to say like I'm studying, it's saying I'm teaching it inside myself. That's why you say Lingi. I am studying it. I am teaching it to myself. And then in this case, so what this elder said to me. Well, I said this to you guys. I'm proud of you the way that you're working. Canoeing. She told me, be of brave heart. It's as if you're going to walk into that icy water, the way that you're going to teach people. Right? And so like when an elder calls you on the phone and says stuff like that, it's amazing. And I want to share it with you because like that's my path to becoming a Lingi teacher. It was like having elders who believed in me and who, she knew what time my classes were. She would call me and just get me all fired up because she probably knew I was nervous, right? This is when I first started teaching people here 11 years ago. My big baby was a little baby. Okay. I did say quite a few other things. This is the way people love each other. Aadé wushtutzakhaniya. That's the way people love each other. Is they help each other, right? Always help each other, look out for each other. A language learning and use community is very small. And so you always have to think about the ripple effects of your actions. And always try, so for me it comes back to, we just got to go right to this. We got to go to the source. Hold on. I'll tell you guys a little bit about this. No, fool. Okay. Google's trying to mess me up and change my X to an R. So this is Canoeing. His name is George Davis. I worked with him a lot. And Shaanáx, Marge Dutson. Those were two that really knew yáat'aa. They're like a fortress. Because doing this type of work, sometimes people will have a lot of criticisms of you and what you're trying to do. But just by working with these two 90-year-olds who had like incredibly high fluency, it like gave me a lot of backup. Because people would try to kind of be mean to me about the way I'd say things or what I would bring up. Like, okay, go tell George Davis that. He taught it to me. Go tell him he's wrong. Right? And so, and it's not always like full of friction and conflict, but sometimes people just get a little weird. And what I'm hoping is like as we continue to teach people and we continue to use the language, that we embrace things like this. So he and I were working on some big translation project, and then I put all my nice recording gear away, and then he said, this is what my mother used to tell me all the time. He just says this amazing thing. So I just listened to it. And then I took out my phone and I hit record on the voice memo thing and I said, could you say it again? And you'll hear his wife in the background. Her name was Aggie. She was so nice. She was like our coordinator, secretary, treasurer. She did so much stuff for us to keep things going. But she also liked to watch TV, and she used to love calling people. I felt like she called everybody. I feel like she called every Sealaska shareholder to tell them what the payout was going to be, because she was just like, it's such and such per share. It's such and such, like all day long, and I would just hear it. But sometimes when we were recording, I'd have to pop in and say, we're recording, could you please be quiet in your own house? I felt so bad. She was like, fine. Yeah, and so she thought we were done because I was packing stuff up, and we weren't, but you'll hear it a little bit in the background. But this is like foundational stuff to how you should be living your life, if you ask me. And I share it with you because, like, to be honest, some people surprise me with how toxic they end up becoming. So don't be toxic. What's the sound?
Tundatani.
Try it again.
Hesiyach singit anika. Tundatani. Kanikten ḳusteeyí. Tulaan. Kakusakhan ḳusteeyí. Yáat'aa singit ani. Akagede kuxlakwat akukekwatii ḳusteeyí. Kwasnik tuikadek kwagut. Adjawaj as kusakhan. Katulaan itek tuyena u. Jawase uke ikatini. Yaan itusiani ku. Kwas iida haskuhtashi.
So we'll take a closer analysis of it, because since I made this video, I got some wonderful assistance from Shuwatáni, Will Geiger, who listened to it, and as we sort of got ready for the second edition of the Beginning Tlingit workbook, we made some edits because he was a really good close listener. So here we have like very complicated Tlingit language stuff and very wonderful Tlingit Tundatani, which for me, I just keep coming back to this kind of stuff. When people start getting weird and hurtful and toxic, I just come back to this, and I try to control what I can control, and then try to sort of say, as I teach people, let's make this foundational to the way that we live our lives. Because you can't just say we live our traditional values and have it on a magnet on the fridge and then go around hurting people. So he says, this is what his mother used to say to him all the time. So it's a little different than how I had it translated there. So in this case, this would be one thing, like this hesh is linked to these two verbs, which other speakers might say shish. So it's saying don't do this verb and don't do that verb. That's why they end with this underlined K. Right? You say shish ichak, don't eat it. Shish at ishik, don't touch it. And then it says iyach shingit anika, the people of the world who are like you. Nik Dane. This Dane thing, we're going to take a look at this next semester. It's an adverb. A lot of times there's certain, especially certain verb roots you can take and throw Dane on it, and it means to do it, like Dane comes from yáat'aa, so it means goodly or well. Nik is pain or sickness. So for me, Nik Dane is to do something with ill will, with the intention of hurting somebody. So here he says, hesh iyachlinket anecha nikdain da yicha. So this verb is saying to say something to somebody. Don't say hurtful things to people of the world. Chanikdain kuta inek. And don't do things to hurt people. What's up?
If you have ka in a sentence and you start with hesh, does that always put the verbs in a negative mode, or is there times where you would have to say hesh again?
The hesh usually jumps over to the verb.
To
Like,
both of them?
Yeah, so for example, I first started thinking about this, like, for example, this, what is that?
It's
Dasa.
What's
nothing left.
Nothing,
wrong? Oh,
Nothing.
nothing, right? And so then you could say, ausaku. What's that?
They know.
They know it,
right.
or them, it could be them, right? And then what's awasku?
They don't know them, or they don't know it.
And so this verb must go through this change, right? I was listening to somebody one time, like really giving a big speech and saying, Keshhas ausaku. I was like, awasku, right? Like if my teachers had been alive, and this was, I don't want to get into it, but. So we have hesh dasa, and we have ausaku, and hesh awasku.
Wow.
I was talking with a speaker who said this. What do you think that translates to?
No, nothing?
But what's interesting, I would say yes,
They all know nothing.
and you have hesh dasa, which is nothing. But when he said it, I noticed the verb went negative. So then I would say, well, technically, I would probably say, they all don't know anything. Ironically, we're getting into the Dane potentially, right? Just to answer the question with something that I heard. Hesh dasa has awasku. So in this case, once you have hesh or tesh, it's usually going to jump over and push that verb negative, if that's what we're talking about.
So that would also work with su or ku'ah in a sentence?
A lot of times, yeah. But those don't affect the verb in the same way, because once you put tesh in there, that verb's got to
But I
change.
mean, if we started off with hesh and then it went on and it was like su, and then it had, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and so it goes, because this one you have hesh, and it affects this verb and that verb, right? So it says, don't do this and don't do that. You could have said tesh right there too.
Right, okay, I was wondering, like, instead of saying ka, it said also, don't do that.
Right. So in this case, you have don't say hurtful things or do hurtful things. And then he says, yes, I'll put that in the notes. I just saw that in the chat. Yes,
What is the yach part at the beginning?
like you. So this yach is like or similar to something, right? So for example, there was another story where they're talking about a woman having birth, and they'd build a brush house for her to have the baby, and they said, just do yach shawat duchant hasbuat. Only the women who were like her went to see her. And if I heard that, I would think, oh, the ones of the same clan. But in this case, when he says people of the world, it's saying you're a person of the world, they're people of the world, they're just like you. So there's a lot, I think, that's built in there too, right? Like you're not better than anybody, you're not, you're just a person on the world, and you should be kind.
Kune, can I ask you something? Do you refer to this when speaking to your kids?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, and I say this kind of stuff to my kids all the time. Also, I remember, like when your kids are really little, it's a pretty emotional time, I think. And I remember we were in Daeshu, we're in Haynes, and Ava was a really tiny baby, kind of must have been 2. And she really wanted to go play with these kids at the playground. I could see it. But they were being really mean to her, and they wouldn't let her play. And it hurt her feelings. And so when she came and she was very sad, like I was going to play with her, I was like, oh, I'll play with you. But then I wanted to say, I said, awudanéix'i ḳusteeyí uhan qoa chitlak oe titlaan ḳaqusachan qajich. And then she felt better, right? And so I said, we are self-respecting people. It doesn't matter what other people are doing. We always give people love and respect. And so I come back to a lot of these core values as I'm teaching my kids, which is challenging when you see people being mean to your kids, because you're like, okay, get you little kid, but you can't. You gotta like take that high road. That's what it's about. Being awudanéix'i means you respect yourself. And that means you always have to make the right decision. And the way my great-grandpa taught my grandpa was, he said, the more it impacts you emotionally, the longer you need to take to make a move, or else you'll just be acting from anger. And I talk to my kids a lot about anger. I say, Tááx'aa Grammar. I should write some of these down. Hold on. So there was, someone asked about Aadé, whoosh, Tundatani, whoops. And this is the way people love each other. And then awudanéix'i is self-respecting people. Titlaan ḳaqusachan qajich. And that's we give kindness and love to people. Didn't I just say another one? Oh, yeah, it said Tááx'aa that's it. So I say that to my kid, which is you won't get anything with anger. And I try to, as I'm trying to calm, because sometimes your kids get real mad, and you're trying to calm them down and just say, like, if you do something, and there's a whole bunch of things in Tlingit too that talk about anger and moving too fast. And these are really important, and I think they are important because odds are pretty good. Someday someone's going to hurt you, someone's going to offend you, someone's going to hurt someone you care about. And that means you need to come back to these because they have to be foundational. I think that's the only way that, coming back to and that's why I went to so many of the elders and said, tell me this, tell me that, tell me this, tell me that. Because I knew we're in for a long, hard road to get our language back to a safe place. And I think part of keeping us from that safe place is the way we pick at each other and tear each other down, right? Which is, they say whoosh, or you say whoosh, the key, shot, which is hold each other up. And then whoosh jin, to shut Yesu, Tlingit ani which is from Qatye, David Kadishan, which is, in this world, we are still holding each other's hands. Because I think the world shows us a lot of unkindness. It shows us a lot of things. I think the way I was raised by non-indigenous value systems was like when someone does something, you have to do that same thing back to them. Like it's a revenge-based sort of system. And I think that's an ineffective system as far as how to live. And I think about that a lot as I sort of raise kids and sort of come back, like there's a reason why he told me this. There's a reason why his mother told him this all the time, right? So then he says, just to sha'an, ḳusteeyí. Oh, okay, hold on. Let me go back. There was one more. Okay, what I told my kid, I said, I was probably crying when I said this to her too, because I was so mad. This is a really neat word, ḳusteeyí. It could pop up. It's an adverb as well. So it could pop up before a verb, and it says it doesn't matter, right? And it's an important one. Like, so it's like it doesn't matter how they treat us. We have to do the right thing. And these are sometimes hard words to live by. And then I think I have the other part. So in this case, it doesn't matter what they do to us, right? And there's different ways you could say kind of this part. I don't know exactly. It was 9 years ago, so I don't exactly remember. But these things are always interesting, like raising kids in a community, living in a community, right? Like I used to take my kid to the to the gym. Okay, I got a funny story because these are all kind of intense stories. So first the intense one, like the kids would run through this little tunnel and then crawl up this thing and go down this slide. It was this big inflatable thing. And sometimes kids would hide in there and push kids down and knock them over. And so I'd crawl in there and I'd be like, don't you touch my baby! And I'd be all hardcore with these, because I'm like, where's their parents? I take my daughter there all the time, and then there's these two little boys that always wanted to come and I'd wrestle with my kid, and they'd always want to wrestle with us. And it's kind of like, well, I'm here to play with my kid. I don't really want to, I don't know you. But, you know, then the grandmother came up and said, thank you for always, like, including my grandkids. Their father is not part of their life, so it's neat for them to have, like, a male figure. So I was like, okay, fine. I'll wrestle them up. Then it gets weird, right? So then every week I go there, the kids are interacting with me, and they give me a nickname, which was the tickler guy. And then I'm thinking, well, I'm uncomfortable with that, but that's because of how society is. So why should I conform to society's idea that men shouldn't touch other kids? I'm like, I don't know what the rules are here. So fast forward to like weeks later, right? So this is going on, and I just want to play with my kid anyway. So it's like, I wasn't here to like play with a whole bunch of kids, whatever. Mariah, she finds something on Craigslist. She's like, go to these people's house and pick up this toy. It's like, okay. So whose house does it turn out to be? These two kids, these two boys. But I never met their mothers. And so I knock on the door, and they answer the door, and they said, it's the tickler guy. And then the mother like gives me this look, and I said, oh, we go to the same gym. And I was like, I'll just take the thing and go. It's too weird. So. Okay. Back to the business. So he says, so just is like just or only. Sha'an is the noun form of the verb for kindness. Tushle'an. Ḳusteeyí is the noun form of the verb to love. Tááx'aa, put it inside your heart. So only put love and kindness inside your heart. This is in songs, this is in speeches. We know that the world spins. Tlinkits have known this for a long time. But this isn't the verb for spinning, this is the verb for rolling. So the world just keeps rolling. Yanashkwatlishinkitani. Akagedegichlagwatl. Xusteeyí. It's going to roll up to this place where your life goes out of control. This is a really interesting thing. Means just blindly out of control. And then this verb, everybody know what this verb looks like? When you just say it like in the imperfective, in the right now? Yati. Right, so this is yati, wuti, kukwati. And we hear it sometimes as yekwati. It's all the same verb. Yekwati, yati, wuti. But when you put in front of it, it's a little bit different. The verb itself would function the same. Yati. It's out of control. Wuti. It was out of control. Kwati. It's gonna be out of control. Xusteeyí is your life. And then we have Gwashnikutsu ikadek kwagud. So the setup for this, he's not saying like this is just going to happen to everybody. What he's saying is if you are speaking bad about people and trying to hurt people, then your life will spin out of control. Sickness will come upon you. That's what this Gwashnikutsu ikadek kwagud. Just that is why only put love and kindness in your heart. However your life ends up getting out of control, like if it does happen, the people that you are kind with, maybe they will help you. So for me, like this stuff is foundational. Like this is why we do the thing, right? To get these values, because this is a big part, I think, of language revitalization. It's like, can you live these things? Can you put these things in your heart? So somebody does something to you, somebody is being hurtful themselves, then what is your role when you start to sort of enact this stuff? And then as a teacher of people, how do you make sure that the next generation is going to be less hurtful? Because the things that I see is we still hurt ourselves, we still hurt each other. We're not getting there yet, but we're hopefully on our way. Thoughts?
Hune. I do. Just curious. Sorry. Yeah, trying to phrase my question. Do we have any knowledge of context or origin for these really truly profound concepts? I mean, as far as we know, have they always been part of Tlingit culture, handed down through the language, or have they arisen in like a post-contact scenario where we're trying to figure out how to handle some really difficult things? Or is there any knowledge out there on these values?
When I worked with him probably 5 years ago, he was like 92 years old. So that means he was being raised in the 1920s. So it was probably a pretty direct Tundatani thing at that time, because then his mother would have been probably born in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he grew up in Cake. And so Cake at that time was undergoing a shift, and some of these communities did undergo tremendous shifts. But if you really put it together, if you look at the stories, if you look at so many things, like some of these foundational concepts are there. Like they'll say, And there's no way I think that that concept was given to us from anybody. Because if you look at the colonizers in the 1920s, I don't think they would have said, yes, there is a spirit in everything, in that tree, in that rock, in that fish. They wouldn't, that's not the philosophy, I think, of folks who were over here colonizing. I think they had a whole different mindset, which was like these hierarchies, right? Which is, things are just different. And so I think some of these things, and if you go into some of the older speeches and some of the older stories, you find these similar concepts, which is all, and that's why we have terms like awudanéix'i, shaanáx, and ḳusteeyí, because we knew that it takes conscious living to be that way, right? Like you can't just say, yeah, I'm a respectful person, I'm a self-respecting person. But then when you're presented with an opportunity to do something and maybe no one's going to find out if you cause harm to someone else, then if you engage in that, then you've sort of let go of that thing. And so that's why I think about these things quite a bit, just trying to sort of, because I've also seen too, like incredible toxicity, and sometimes from elders, right? And sometimes at gatherings. And I've seen people just tear each other apart. And it's been really hard. And sometimes I've been torn apart. We were at a language thing, and someone said, oh, Canoeing's getting his ass kicked in the men's room. And they were, because we had divided into men and women, right? And we're supposed to try and work on our issues to try and be safer, better, stronger people. And with the women, like their conversation was wonderful and vulnerable and positive and talking about things that they need. And the men, like there's a recording of, if you want to go watch it, it's the Language Summit in November of, I don't remember what year that was, 2015 maybe, 16. And it was horrible. It was awful. But when someone said, Canoeing's getting his ass kicked in the men's room, they're like, he's in the bathroom and somebody like physically beat him up, right? But that wasn't the case. But what was going on was like incredibly bad, toxic behavior. And, you know, but my hope is that for some of us who learned in the early 2000s, like maybe we take the brunt of that and we go wash ourselves in the ocean, and then we go and we give something better to the next generation of learners. And so, I mean, that's the hope, right? That's the goal. What's that?
I just wanted to say awudanéix'i sing it Tundatani, yes. I know spending time with elders and elders like King Kisti who always encouraged us to love each other the way that we were meant to, and you know the love, respect, reciprocity, just also built into our culture. I think it's it's pretty clear that this goes farther back than contact, but when I originally raised my hand, I wanted to talk about, or I wanted to say that these phrases and the words from George Davis I think would be great in the upcoming lateral kindness workshops that I'm going to help plan, and hoping to have 3 of them in 3 communities in Southeast, and maybe get more funding and do more. But I know that contractor, Yadurten Marilyn Jensen, she tries to build in the indigenous knowledge about how we're supposed to love and treat each other wherever she does these workshops. So I would love to bring some of these phrases into that process.
Yeah.
And maybe I could collaborate with you a little bit there.
Yeah, that'd be great, because these, like I'll share these notes on our class webpage, and then when Yadiltin came to visit with us months ago, it seems like years ago now, but it was like a month or two ago. I was putting a whole bunch of stuff in the chat. I was like just a whole bunch of thoughts. Like just that was the first time I had been through the lateral kindness training, and I had a whole bunch of thoughts just in terms of things, because there's quite a few elders who really taught me a lot of these values, and then there were quite a few elders where I went to for language, because they would hurt people. Like I would see them hurt people, and I would see them say things. And if you spoke Tlingit, you would know they were hurting people. But even some of them were real sneaky, and like, even if you spoke Tlingit, you might not know that they're hurting someone in the room. And so then I tried to just sort of get language from them, but not necessarily value systems, which is it's a slippery slope. It's a weird thing to sort of go to wisdom keepers and elders and then try and sort of decipher when it's crossing a boundary into like harmful behavior. But this is some of the work that has to happen in language revitalization. Is sometimes you have to look at that stuff and realize there's a lot of people with pain, and there's a lot of people with insecurities and other types of things, and trying to sort of figure out when do you sort of start moving in a different direction, which is always a tricky thing. And hopefully we'll have future generations where it's easier. It's a lot easier. And I think it does happen. Like these kids, they could just speak without trauma, which is really neat. And then we just want more kids who have these relatively trauma-free lives, and that the language is just part of it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, to Janine's point, we can sort of take this language and work to put it out there, to help remind us to remember who we are, how we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to treat each other. And I'm hoping to work with Sea Alaska and Tlingit and Haida on these lateral kindness workshops. Okay. And I also want to do some you know, social media sharing about what is lateral kindness, and we can, you know, work to put these phrases out there as well.
Okay.
Sheesh.
Sheesh. Awudanéix'i, what's that?
A couple of questions. One, have you won that Emmy?
Oh, we go tomorrow, so we'll find out on Saturday.
Second, I was wondering, this is just a curious question. Have you ever had someone have Tlingit dialect bias, where they think their dialect of Tlingit is the most correct?
Is this a trap? I was thinking of that little fish guy in Star Wars. It's like, this is a trap.
Click.
Yes. When I was going to teach, I was going to go teach in a community that has a very strong dialect, and they do a wonderful job holding on to their dialect. And the class almost got canceled because they said, we don't want him coming here and teaching a different dialect. But the reality is they weren't going to have a community class. Like, they would rather not have a class. And so you do encounter this. I also have encountered speakers who you can't tell them where you got a certain phrase or name because they might not like the person that you got it from. And so sometimes it's a personal level. Like, I love a lot of our elders, but one of them I was saying, she's like, oh, who named this? I was like, oh, so-and-so. I didn't know they didn't get along. And then they said, my arch nemesis. And then they said, we got to come up with a different name. I was like, oh, I like that name for toilet or plunger, whatever the thing was that we were naming. And so you see it at a personal level, you see it at a dialect level, but a lot of the dialect stuff, it's a lot of playful banter. I see it more as that than right or wrong. But also there's so few speakers, like, I don't know if there's any speakers of Southern Tlingit left. There's maybe one speaker left of the yáat'aa dialect, maybe two, maybe three. Cake is holding pretty steady with their dialect, but maybe there's three speakers left from there. Teslin is probably the strongest because they probably have a dozen high fluency speakers who are up there. And so we do try to sort of keep the dialects alive, and also like we do teach like a greater northern dialect, but then also try to say, okay, this you change it from wune to wuni, now you got your dialect. And so yeah, sometimes it's playful, sometimes it's a little bit competitive, and then sometimes it's a little rough, but I've never seen anything that's really too bad. Okay.
Renee,
Uh,
just a quick follow-up. I thought we learned in class last semester that there were like a bunch of kids in Yakutat currently. Are they like learning or like in an immersion program? And are they not learning the Yakutat dialect?
there was a language nest in Yakutat, but it's not functioning anymore.
Okay.
But they're teaching it in the schools, and they are learning their dialect. And so, and when we talk about dialect, it's really interesting because sometimes there's a different name for the same thing, right? Like what is atkhashtiti? Anybody know that one? Moccasins, right? So atkhashtiti is something cut up shoes. That's what it means. But in Yakutat, the old speakers would say keshtil. And so that's a different name for the same thing. Other times you have a single sound switch, which isn't that hard, right? So in some places you have quwakan, in other places you have quwakan, where sometimes it's just, or you have nukshiyan and shukshiyan, where it's like, oh, well, it's that sound here, but this other sound there. And some of those, like those two, aren't highly predictable, but others are, especially the vowels. So there's a lot of things that would be an A vowel, like you'd say eich for oil. But if you go to Southern Tlingit, or sometimes the Teslin, it would go to ich. So then it goes from A to E. So sometimes you have some things like that. Then with Teslin speakers, the two things that you have, and also Carcross, is there's certain patterns. So if you have a vowel and a single W, which is a perfective marker, and then a classifier with a consonant and a vowel, that'll switch to an M. So for example, awdagan would be umdagan. Awshachech would be umshachech. Then the other one is they hold on to this gamma sound. We call it the gamma. I call it shewaki Y. It's a Y with two dots over it. So for example, this phrase that I shared earlier, like back at the beginning, Aadé neyi, like that would be said different in Teslin. So in Teslin, it would be this, and then that would sound like Aadé neyi. It would sound like an NG. Aadé neyi.
That's what the two dotted Y is?
Yes. So this is two different things, right? So sometimes if we're writing it in a whole phrase, that means make it like an NG sound. For example, what is this?
Stand up.
Yes, you all stand up. In Teslin, you'd say this. And it's the same phrase, but you would say ging danak, and you would hear that sound. You would hear it very clearly. Ging danak. And so that is something with Teslin and Carcross speakers, and some of the speakers in Klukwan. Good questions.
Yeah, I kind of have one. I was wondering about like, maybe it's a time thing. I remember Kinkus did talking about like, sometimes in songs you can hear about how far it goes back in time. And in thinking about like when people left the coast to go to escape the flood and then came back, is there any indication of time as far as like, the difference in dialectical changes from here and there?
Well, so I guess, let's see.
I mean, that's very
That's a good question.
out there, sorry, but.
So I guess I'd come back to this map here. And I would say yes. So this little blue section here is Tááx'aa. And this is there's also a dialect, which is Tááx'aa dialect, which nobody speaks anymore. The last speakers of Tááx'aa passed away in the 1980s. However, so there are some, okay, so a verb will have a root and a stem. So the root is saying like this word has meaning. So like shot means to grab something or to catch it. T means to be. Ton is to carry an empty container, right? So like when you talk about a verb root, you're talking about what that word means. When you say the stem, you're saying what is the vowel going to do? So for example, if you have ton, you've got three options. Everybody know what the three options are? Hold on, let's make a note here. So if we have this verb root, ton, you usually have three options as far as what it's going to look like. So if we said this is to carry an empty container. So that's talking about the root. The root has to do with meaning. The stem has to do with the vowel. What do you think your three options are going to be?
Short and high is one of them.
Short and high?
Long and low.
Long and low. Long and high, right? Yeah, there you go, there you go. Okay. That's it. Those are your three. It's going to be one of those three, right? So when we talk about that, there are some verbs that do not have a low version. And one of them is shot. So when you look up a verb, if you look at, okay, hold on. Let me see how I can do this. Okay, so we'll look it up in the dictionary. So when we go look up a verb, this is a long answer to your question. So we're going to go look up shot, to catch something. Right, so we go down, sh, shock, shan, shosh, shot. This is marked high. What that means is there is no low version. So by the rules of Tlingit grammar, because this is a g conjugation type, in the perfective it should be long and low. You'll learn all these rules, right? If we look up the perfective of this verb, it's long and high. That's because it will not go low. One of the theories is that it won't go low because this comes from Tááx'aa Tlingit, where there was no high tone, low tone, and it would have been sha'at. There'd be a little glottal stop in there. So going back to this map, what I believe is that Tlingit peoples migrate along the Naas, come up, settle in this area, Tááx'aa, and they're being Tlingit. At some point, either before or during or after the flood, they encounter another Dane group and absorb them. And that introduces tone into Tlingit. So I think after the flood they come back, and you could have all kinds of theories about who they are, what they were, but somewhere another language was probably absorbed, which is why Tááx'aa doesn't have high tone, low tone. All the other Tlingit does. So Tááx'aa stays the same. Everything else just starts spreading out. So it's probably during the flood when they go inland, probably marry up with some other group, which is why I'm not that big on like blood purity. It's like, man, we've been like just making babies with everybody forever. So then they come back and then they have this different form of Tlingit. Then the dialects, and then you could get into migrations and dialects from there. But that's why we mark them with these different colors, right? It's not a totally non-controversial thing. Some people get really upset about this stuff, but this is how I think Tlingit dialect works. Is you had Tááx'aa, which you don't have anymore, but now you have Southern, Northern, and something in the middle. Just kind of takes things from both. For the big difference is with the vowels, the A to the E vowel, but also for Southern Tlingit, which there's maybe no speakers left of at this point, they would also be more likely to drop vowels in the prefix of a verb, including the letter I in a classifier, which is bananas, because Tlingit outside of that would never drop it. So for example, you might have a classifier that is, like you say, shtu yidli tu. Like I said that earlier, yidli tu. They might say shtu yitl tu, but they just drop that vowel and it becomes TL classifier. If you read the story Duk Tut in Hashuka, you'll see examples of it.
So if it always comes in a high tone shot, why is it listed in the dictionary? If it always comes in a high tone version, why is it listed in the dictionary as a low tone?
Where?
If you zoom out a little bit. I got the very top of that entry. In the blue, where it says grab, hold, catch.
Oh, okay. So when I list and this is something where there's, I think when James Crippen and Carrie Eggleston are listing verbs now, they're putting them as short, low. So I think it would just say shut. When I put a verb there, it's always going to be just long and low. I'll say look it up long and low, but then you go from there. Unless it's always invariable, like
The little X thing.
khan, right? So I think khan is always khan. So yeah, when it has this little X, it means the vowel does not change.
Initiation.
They have good questions. Okay. We're going to take a 5-minute break. It's got to be short.
There's a raise hand.
Oh, okay, what's that? Maybe there'll be no break today.
I was just wondering if it seems like you know at least something about at least some of the dialects. I'm wondering if we know enough about the dialects to at some point in the future we could teach them in those areas.
Sure. Yeah, and we teach, and I have helped to teach Teslan dialect. There are enough speakers for Yakutat. There's enough language documentation for Cake. James Crippen knows enough about Southern Tlingit. Yeah, I think it's possible. Like, if you're talking about reconstructing, like Southern Tlingit would require a reconstruction at this point, because there are no speakers left of Southern that I know of. The last ones were on Prince of Wales. Tááx'aa, if people wanted to bring it back, they could. I think that one would be the hardest because it's quite a bit different and no one has spoken it for 40 years now. But not to say it's impossible. So yeah, but I think we do know enough and it's documented. And Goon was sort of right in the middle. Like they would do things that certainly seemed like Southern, but then they would do things that certainly seemed Northern.
I was also envisioning a future when we're all fluent and then we might get other changes. This isn't that naturally happens over time.
Yeah, I think there would be shifts, like some of the shifts that, and we have these conversations too, which are, what are the things that we want to hold on to? For example, it used to be like this, like, what is this phrase? mean? What does this mean? Do. And how do you say it in Tlingit? Was it in English?
Your
Do you-
child.
Their child, right?
Maybe.
So the old time Tlingit is it would sound like this. Duwadi. So you did have these, and if you listen to like Susie James and if you listen to Frank Italio, you'll hear them say yai. And so sometimes there'll be a gamma on the front, sometimes there'll be a gamma on the back, sometimes there'll be both. So you'll certainly hear it, you'll hear that sound. And so for Teslin, they're saying, let's hold on to that sound, we still got it. For other communities, they're saying, well, we used to use it, but now we don't. And it's a bit of a discussion. It's kind of a community level discussion. It's like, do you hold on to it? Another similar example would be if you say ḳuwatí or ḳuyatí. And this still comes back to that same sound.
In the case of the Y with the 2 dots and yadi, would that have changed to a Y in a different context? Like if they said ach instead of do?
Yeah, that would probably be aqyati. So then we see like this, and there's a transition where maybe like 200 years ago it was aqngeti, like all the time. But as that sound fell out of most Tlingit, it transitioned to this Y that's sometimes a W. And usually if we're writing, so like if we're writing whole language and we have that on there, like if you look in the Raven book, you'll see examples of that Y with the 2 dots in there. It's all over the place because old-time speakers used to use it all the time. But if we're writing like parts of a verb, like we'll say y, ya, good. When we sort of pull it apart like that, we're not saying make that NG sound. We're saying this is, well, in this case, and you learn how to recognize this. This is a perfective marker, and this is almost always a W, but sometimes it's a Y. And this is the classifier, and it's almost always a Y, but sometimes it's a W. Okay. Short break or work through it? It's the last class. Up to you guys.
Keep on going.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Take a break if you need to. We were doing wild stuff last night. Okay. So this does get us back to our story. I think we're not going to get through the whole thing, but we'll keep going and sort of like practicing and looking at all these parts in action, right? Because if you keep pulling the language apart, you've got to get back to whole language in order to be sort of unfragmented, right? Because if you're always pulling it apart, then it's like you're learning how to play an instrument, but you're only playing like little tiny notes. You got to play the whole thing at some point, which is what we're trying to do with here. So he spent quite a bit of sentences like just sort of setting up why he would even tell this story, right? And we talked about this a little bit. So this gets us to this line now, which let me make sure I'm sharing sound.
Yáat'aa
Someone want to read that? Sheesh. And how would we translate this?
Sorry.
And the interior.
That's one of the Dhaka Kwan people.
Yeah. Dakakwan.
Huh.
What's the You know what that is?
It's like where they live.
Well, so Tlingit loves to do this type of thing, right? Well, let's just expand the whole thing. We were there. So what Tlingit likes to do is like name a place and then switch to saying or or ach or something like that. And so it's saying at that place that we just named. So the ah part is there. And when we put this suffix on there, it becomes ach. Ach ye ha wutich. We lived there repeatedly. Yudakha aya. Ach ye ha wutich. There's the verb, ha, that's the object, us. Wutich, perfective with a repetitive marker on there. We used to always live there. Or we used to live there often or repeatedly.
Tááx'aa awudanéix'i ḵusteeyí ach. Tááx'aa awudanéix'i ḵusteeyí ach.
You read that?
You should just go in a circle.
Oh. I'll get an order next semester. I'll make a reading list.
Tááx'aa awudanéix'i ḵusteeyí ach.
Sheesh. And what do we recognize there?
ḵusteeyí. It's
Ḳusteeyí.
like our life.
Yeah, our life.
Or life was very hard there.
Our life was very
Our-
difficult there. Yeah, well.
Isn't it like ice?
Yeah, well, ich as a verb root does mean frozen. So, but usually if you said wutlit ich, it's frozen. Wut ich, it was difficult. But it's the same verb root, right? So it means difficult or frozen. So tach is very, ayah wut ich. That's a perfective form of that verb. Ḥusteeyí ach. So there's ach again. Our life was very difficult there. So that ach keeps tying it back to the interior.
Yáat'aa. Yáat'aa.
That's so short. Somebody read that.
Yáat'aa.
What is that? These fish, right? This salmon, the salmon, right? So Tlingit does not use articles like the or a or n. So it uses ya and yu and we. Kind of similar ways, right? So the salmon.
Ja iskatach gekekakt. Yáat'aa. Ja iskatach gekekakt. Yáat'aa.
Gotta read it.
Be quiet, Mom.
A deuce of days.
I was looking at the kids. Ya'esh kadach ha-e-ke kakt yachat.
There's cheesh. And what do we recognize?
There's the salt water, right?
Yeah. H. So dakha is inland. Hka is coastal. Dakha tlingit. Hka tlingit. Saltwater peoples. How to say it.
Or mounts.
Yeah, and so what you also have Hka dach. Right? So what is the dach part doing there?
Saltwater people.
From the ocean. Hake, our mouths. Pe chakch.
Something like, sounds almost like cake.
Something
Upwards, something upwards.
Upwards.
put into it. Put into it.
It's okay. Well,
Put up to our mouths.
and what do they do to our mouths?
put it in.
They fed us.
Okay, hold on. All right. We're all making wonderful guesses.
Is it they fed us or we eat them?
What if we just looked up a verb root? It might be time to look up a verb root. So again, ḳaqch. There's a CH on there which says that's probably the repetitive thing, right? So let's look up ḳaq, long and low. Wonderful finding. There it is. To swim.
Oh.
Okay.
All right.
We have dictionaries and everything.
They swam up to our mouths?
Yes. So again, like it gets into this sort of metaphor, right? What does that mean?
It was plentiful. The fish came easy.
Yeah, right? We lived in the interior, the fish swam up so we can eat them.
Right, they swim.
To our mouths, right? And Tlingit does this stuff a lot. Like there was an elder one time, she came to my house and she says, "Aqitsa inhin." I looked at her, she goes, "Do you know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm saying?" I was like, "Yeah." Put water to your mouth? She's like, "Give me some water to drink." Right? And so they would say stuff like that too. Aqitsa in. Bring it to my mouth. So yes. And this is how Tlingit like talks about some of this stuff too. They swam up to the interior so we could eat them. Somebody read it. Sheesh. And what do we recognize? Ugh, which is very.
Around this location.
Yeah, dot. Well, you have dot and you have sa over here. So whenever you have da sa, you have what. That's a what question or statement. If you put anything in between da and sa, it'll become dot sa. And it's still a what question. So you say kach dot yach saya, which would
Like
be
what?
What's
yes.
it like?
What is it like? Right? If that was a question, dot yach saya, what's it like?
Everything was it like?
What's ha'cheyake? What's yake?
Our mouth, our
Good.
mouth, because it's
Yes.
good.
Ha'cheyake is how you say, we think it's delicious. It's delicious to us.
Oh.
Right? So that could you could change it to acheyake qunach atchishi. Dry fish is really yummy to me. Right? Acheyake. Some people will say achait yake, but we can see here from Shaanáx that we don't always have to have that.
Okay.
So in this case, a'aya kachta jachsaya ha'cheyake yachat, which you could say, really, it is really like this. The salmon is delicious to us. So in this case, it's not asking a question, it's making a statement. Which you'll see this with the question markers. They'll say things like, wasa hatuwuwu kewegao. We were so happy at that time. A'aya kachta jachsaya ha'cheyake yachat. I guess another way is you could say, what could really be like it that tastes so good to us, the salmon. So there's different ways you could interpret that too. You could probably say, there's nothing that tastes as good as salmon. Salmon people.
Gosh, that's great.
Chonach yáat'aa ḳusteeyí ka. Chonach yáat'aa ḳusteeyí ka.
Kanach yatich ǩusteeyí ka.
What do we got?
Is that hard or frozen?
So that would be the imperfective of that other one. So wut'ich, it was difficult. Yat'ich, it is difficult.
Very difficult.
It is very
Or
difficult.
lives in the interior.
Yeah.
Wait.
Life in the interior is really difficult. What's that? See a hand up.
Geez. Yeah, I was curious about in English, there's not a whole lot of difference in how hard is used. But in Tlingit, we have a perfective and an imperfective, and then in the next line there's awudanéix'i, and in the slide you haven't come to yet. So just wondering why the imperfective as well as the perfective in this sense. And maybe it's my tired brain, I'm 2 time zones ahead, but
Yes, and so like when you examine storytelling, especially as you start to get more and more comfortable with the Tlingit language, you'll notice them drifting back and forth between imperfective and perfective and repetitive. And sometimes they'll just keep repeating a concept too and keep saying it differently. And you would do a similar thing in English. You might say, when we lived in the interior, it was really hard. It was such a difficult life. It's really hard, right? So like you're just going to say it in different ways to like provide emphasis on like how difficult it was. And so in the context of this whole story, what he's getting to is like, there was a time when the salmon didn't come, and then people's lives got so difficult that some people started eating other human beings, right? And so like this cannibal was born out of this human suffering, where people made this, because when we get to this thing and we talk about like ḳusteeyí, it's such an interesting word because it sounds like the people of eating people, right? So like they become a kwan, they become like a whole, like a nation of people, but it's because they've crossed this sort of boundary. And then this particular cannibal in the story also has a name. So I think when we examine this, we go back and we say, he says it several times, right? So going back here, our life was really difficult there. And then we come down and then we get now it's using the imperfective to say it is very difficult to live in the interior. Like even today, right? He's still saying that. And then we come down and we get, we'll jump ahead. So in this case, he's saying how difficult it was that the people of the villages started to eat each other. So in this case, what he's doing is, I think he's using it in 3 different ways to show like it was absolutely unusually difficult, and it created this rip in the way that people live their lives. Like something horrible really happened. And so for me, that's why he starts to use them in different ways. And it's something that as you study Tlingit storytelling more, you'll realize you can't just say it in one way, right? If you really want to be like a classically trained Tlingit storyteller, And then when you came back, like, I think, you know, based on stuff I listened to from like Clarence Jackson and others, like he said his uncle would tell him a story. Like he'd tell him the whole thing. And then it's okay. And all his cousins were out playing, and he had to go to his uncle and learn how to tell stories. And the way that he learned is his uncle would tell him this whole story. And then it's okay to go play. Then he'd get to go play with his cousins. He'd go back to his uncle the next day, and his uncle would say, "Tell me that story I told you yesterday." And if he got any part of it wrong, he would tell him the whole story again. And then once he understood it and he could recite it, he'd say, "Okay, let's do the next one." Right? And so there's a training that went on, and part of that training as well was how you use the language in storytelling. And I think stories are wonderful to go to learn from, but it's also like, you know, if we're teaching English as a second language, and then we say, okay, The Tempest by William Shakespeare, right? Like it's like this very elevated form of language is what you have in Tlingit. But I think it's also good because then you see all these different ways of saying a similar type of concept. So here you have awudanéix'i sayu, how difficult it was. And that could be framed as a question. Awudanéix'i sayu, how difficult was it? Way over there. But in this case, it's framing this other thing. It was, how difficult was it? Or in this case, you could say, it was so difficult. Awudanéix'i, that they are eating each other. You do have something going on right here. I want to point this out. Tlingit has a rule, which is the further you get, the more you start getting into these rules, right? And here's one of these rules. If the prefix, so a verb is made up of a prefix and a stem, it has those two things. There are some verbs that don't have a prefix, right? Like the shortest verb, perhaps in Tlingit, is ta. And what is that? Ta. Yeah, they are sleeping, right? As a verb, it sounds a little weird. So you might say, where's so-and-so? Ta. They're sleeping. Like that's a complete sentence. Ta. They are sleeping. But it's rare to have a verb that is only the stem. So here's the rule. If the prefix has a consonant, it must also have a vowel. It cannot only have a consonant, because this is a vowel that doesn't mean anything. It's just put there so that you can say the verb. Because it sounds like awudanéix'i, sounds like you are eating each other, right? It sounds like a you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll show you another example back in the verb dictionary. So I think the verb is ḳ'aaq, which is for a salmon to change color. So here it is, ḳ'aaq, especially a sockeye or a coho. Also a dog salmon, but I don't hear this term used for dog salmons very much. But it means when it hits the fresh water, it changes color. Right? Especially a sockeye turns red. So we'll go look up color, and we'll see it doing the same thing. Scroll down. Here's color. And then the first one we get qat wudzaqaq. Sockeye, the sockeye has changed color. But then we see uk isqaq. That letter I doesn't mean anything at all. It just exists so that we can have a prefix. Because you can't say uk you can't do that. You can't have only a vowel or only a consonant. So it's what we call a peg vowel, and it just gets us to the consonant.
When that's the I, why not A?
I don't know, because A is kind of the default vowel for Tlingit.
Huh.
But when you get into this prefix, it's going to be an I.
Cool.
So that's not interchangeable at all. Like it is I.
It has to be an But I think it can't be an A because then it sounds like a 3-on-3. It sounds like a third person object. If you said it sounds like they colored it that. So I think that's why.
But it could be a long I vowel, so double E, like you just showed.
That's a good question. So coming back to here, which is cha. Well, let's see if it's long or short.
awudanéix'i an chéile. awudanéix'i an chéile.
I think it's short, but it's also very fast. You do get some of them where it could be I or E. Mhm. Oh, I think I wrote it short here and then long here. So never mind me. Wasa.
I was just thinking about how I think remember English class where they say, you know, don't repeat yourself because it makes you sound like less intelligent or something. And but I love the repetition in our language because in our ḵusteeyí because it just emphasizes what's important. And you know, you hear when people are speaking to each other in a meaningful way or something that they really feel or they feel strongly or emotionally, and you know, you get into the repetition of that. And I think it just underscores the importance of what they're saying when they've, you know, it's like they need to say it more than once. And this story, like it seems like he's leading us to a place, to a very difficult concept, because people eating each other is a very, very difficult concept to hear about. And so it seems like he's building up to letting you know, like, things got so hard so that it might be more, you might be more able to process the difficult concept.
Yeah, right. And so, and he's saying it like 3 distinctly different ways, right? And then we come back to this kusakhaquan. Like this thing was such a big deal. Like this is the Gutish house post. It was in Ishkahit. I think it's in their cultural center now in Klukwan. And until, I think it stopped about 30 years ago. But what the people used to do is every spring, when they would make hooligan grease, they would take a spoonful and put it at the corner of the mouths of this to say, don't come back. Because it was such a big deal that they would sort of still be afraid of it today. And that's why he talks about it in this story. And so like coming back to the stories and back to the language, we keep coming back to this concept where like, even in this wonderfully told story, there's a whole universe that it connects to. And as we keep learning more Tlingit, both the life, the way of thinking, the language, and you know, all of it, we realize how interconnected all of these pieces are. Okay.
kusakhaquan kutsete wega. kusakhaquan kutsete wega.
Who wants to read it?
Kusakhaquan kutsete wega.
Okay. What do we got?
It's the time of the life of
This is the time that the countable existed.
Yeah, so when we say like wegao, like when we use it like this, we're saying at that time. Like that's how it's going to work for us here. Like I think I said No, I don't think I said, I think I used Keijin Gao earlier. But if you said like Wegao, at that time, right? It exists, right? So qudzati means to exist. There's a noun form of this verb, which is ḳusteeyí. When you possess that noun, you get ḥusteeyí. And if you use this in the perfective, qudzati, it means to be born. But a lot of times it means to exist, right? So in this case, you're saying the cannibal existed at that time.
Like in our introductions, like when we say where we're born.
Yeah, right. And,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
when I read this, I thought the Kusakhan was born at that time, and it kind of made sense because of it's the situation that it came to that.
Yeah, because you could say like, it was born from that. Like you could say that as well. Okay.
Awe atayok atasaat genuch. Ya iskade haus gaze. Awe atayok atasaat genuch. Ya iskade haus gaze.
Just gonna read it.
I can do that.
Sheesh.
Awe ada you chatoshach at genuch ya esh adecha wushgatse.
Sheesh. And what do we got? This might be the last one we do. We'll see. Awe is a narrative technique. It's like, there it is, that's how it is. It's just, it gets you to the next thing. Adayu katusha atkinuch.
We would.
Here we are doing this verb. The singular form. Yes. They always speak about it. Adayu katusha atkinuch. We always talk about it. So this nooch. What's that?
Oh, I was thinking out loud. Sorry.
No worries. So this nooch pops up after a verb, and it means to always do that verb. And when it does, it will push the verb to go what we call like minus I, right? So you say yuchatusha atki, we are conversing, or you say ada yuchatusha atk, we're talking about it right now. Ada yuchatusha atki nooch, we always talk about it. We always talk about it. Ya echkade habushgatsi. When we migrated to the coast.
Wow.
There's a couple different ways, well, there's 3 different ways to talk about migrating. What do I have that under? So this will be the last thing we do for the whole semester.
Wow.
So there's a verb which would be like ach keusadak. So this verb would be like the clan is breaking up. Something bad has happened. Y'all could stay here. We hate you forever. We're gonna go over here and become our own people. It's not always that dramatic, but this is the dramatic. We're leaving. We're never coming back verb. We have a verb for that.
Wow.
Wow.
There's also one which is, this is a carrying verb to carry multiple stick-like objects. And this means to move temporarily. And there's roots in this. Long time ago, people would take the boards off of the big clan houses in the summertime and go use them to build a fish camp. Then they would return and put the house back together. And this is, there's a village over here called Tááx'aa. It has this verb in it. And then you have gods. And this means we don't know where we're going, but we're going to go live somewhere else. And the verb root for here is a house post.
Oh my God.
Going to take the house post and put it up somewhere else. So you have 3 different ways to talk about migrating. And in those, you're going to also talk about whether or not you're coming back. Whether or not, like, it's, you know, because you could say, we don't really know where we're going, but we just got to go. We're going, but we'll be back. It's over. We're out of here. We're never coming back, right? So there are these 3 different ways to do that.
So are all these ways to say it when the clan is splitting, or is it like a whole clan can be moving somewhere, but we don't
Yeah,
know?
like for this one, it's sort of like we just got to be too many. And so a group of us went off to go over here. Or like we wanted to expand our clan's territory. So we left and we started going over here. This one is more like we had to get out of that place. And it's usually some sort of, there was a famine, there was some bad thing happened between these clans, and so we left. We're never coming back to this place. And then you have to go temporarily, which is saying like, hey, we're just going over here for the summer. So yeah, a lot of these apply. And so whenever you talk about migrations and things that happened, then you're sort of deciding which one you're going to use. And so this one worked really well because when you really look at the flood and how it all worked, it was like settlement, flood, to the coast, lived there for a long time, flood subsides, back to the coast. And it's like, we don't know exactly where we're going. We're going to go back to the coast.
Can we look at the story form and see the verb used?
So then we get to this awudanéix'i. And that's a noun form of our migration. Yáat'aa. We would talk about our migration to the coast.
So this is the migration from like inland interior, like here, or like when the migration from when we left that fast?
In this one, he's probably talking about after the flood when we came back to the coast. Just knowing Shaanáx, he talked about that a lot. Like when they hit that glacier and they went under it. That's when we came back to the coast after the flood. Okay. It's a great semester. We'll finish this story next semester. I'm looking forward to hearing your letters on Tuesday. So Tuesday we get together. Class is not recorded. It's a one and done thing in the moment. Be here with your letter, ready to read it. You'll read your letters. We'll say goodbye. Or we'll say, Ye wushgach tusteen. Take a month. We'll get back together. I also said at the beginning, I want you to come back.
So I have an announcement. So I know Renee's said that we should definitely practice or do something for language. So if you are somebody who likes to have structure and would like to do something that doesn't cost you anything, Outer Coast is doing another massive online open course, January 3rd through the 17th. Oh, look, it's during our break. It's going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 6 to 7:30. And this is aimed at introducing all the different beautiful, wonderful Tlingit language teachers that are doing work across Tlingit. And it's going to be covering a variety of topics of their choice. The announcement will be going, another announcement will be going out this week, next week. If you don't see the announcement, you can also contact me because I will be the coordinator for this week. So
Okay.
come find me, there's no excuse, and you are welcome to bring as many people as you want with you. You can do it with your family, you can do it with your dog, you can do it with your best friend, you can do it with your roommate, you can do it with green eggs and ham, you can do it whenever you want, so come join. Gonna sheesh.
Sheesh. And I will send an
Sheesh.
I'll send an email out with the Basecamp link, with a link to the study group. We got a study room you folks can use at any time. It's just an open Zoom room that folks can use to study. And send questions if you got them about your letter. I'll be available. I'm happy to give you some feedback if you're looking for it. But also, don't worry. It's a no pressure thing. You just do the thing, and we're all happy to hear it. Happy to hear what you're doing. You can write your letter to anybody you want to. You don't have to send it to anybody. No, it's just going to be in the moment. It's not recorded, not posted anywhere. We just come together, read them, and go take our break.
I have an announcement.
Okay.
This is for Lingi, who might like to have an experience over here at ḳusteeyí. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. They're having a concert at ḳusteeyí River Bend, formerly known as River Bend Elementary. And I think that's maybe like 40 minutes or so. At 1:30 tomorrow afternoon is Shaanáx Glacier Valley School is having their school concert, and it's open to the community. And there will be a lot of Tlingit that has been used in the last year, and you'll hear some poems that Xuné has written, and that I've put some melodies to that the kids are singing. And so if you'd like to possibly see what that's like, that'll be for an hour at 1:30 at Shaanáx. So just bug in your ear.
Okay. Gonna cheese. Yewe yande shakwataan yáat'aa. Gonna cheese yak ayiti to cut you on. You go ay one. You two ye tiewa hayu katangi. Yewa aktawasuku ya hatlish ko has yak aya. At datawa you two yisha at ya Aadé you katla at kiya. Ya klingit inach. Gonna cheese plain. Ya wush kanachach to the art dech ye geek. Ya yiyu katangi aya katu'achit gulchish Hollywood de kakwatin zayakwasatin.
A wonderful time. I saw your outfit.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, Mariah.
Outfit?
Yeah.
We have two.
I know.
We're doing the red carpet and everything.
She only had the first one planned and picked that when I saw it. We did see a second one.